We tend to value other people's opinions entirely out of proportion with how valuable they actually are. And so we should stop caring what other people think. But that's a platitude. We can do one better than this. Innovation has a really sordid history in the sense that people who have the next great thing, the next big idea, they're not treated very well. The geniuses of history in science, in business, in anything have not been treated very well because one very simple reason. People are very bad at thinking outside of the current paradigm. Whatever the current mode of thought is, whatever the current cultural milieu, people are not good at trying to imagine things outside of that paradigm and accepting things that are outside of that paradigm. So there are a couple of different reasons for this. We're not good at imagining things out of the paradigm because that's how we have been acculturated. That's how we're accustomed to thinking. All of our habits of thought are associated with that. And unless you happen to be one of those people who is characterized by creativity, which is a small chunk of the population, then it's something that doesn't come as naturally to you. And so trying to think your way outside of those bounds is going to be kind of hard for people. Further, when you see it, when people see the new iPhone or iPad or, here is a way of reproducing sound or a light bulb or whatever it might happen to be, oftentimes the initial reaction is, especially looking at it historically, kind of stupid. And that's exactly what we get with cars. I mean, if you look at what happened when cars first came out, the way that they were treated, the laws that surrounded these things, it was laughably stupid. And so people had no idea what they were up against. They had no idea how much it was going to change the world. And so for the once-in-a-generation geniuses who actually see this, expect not to be treated very well. And this isn't a new thing. This goes all the way back to ancient Greece, where we hear that if you are to become a philosopher, prepare to be ridiculed. Because to be a philosopher, in some sense, is to be ahead of your time and to be thinking outside of the current paradigm, and people don't really like that very much. Now, there's another aspect of this which is really fascinating, and this is from Alexis de Tocqueville. So de Tocqueville said of democracy that democracy is always right, but for the wrong reasons. And that's beautiful in a certain way, and I want to expand on that and explain it in a way that maybe you haven't heard before. So I maintain that democracy allows us to create a Hegelian tension. In other words, a Hegelian dialectical tension that prevents us from resting on one side or the other. It prevents us from going too far in either direction, too far in either extreme, and the truth tends to be somewhere down the middle. And so it's kind of like a chorus of voices. Not everyone in the chorus necessarily has to be the best singer, but if everybody is sort of off pitch in the same way, kind of maybe normally distributed around the right note, then what's actually going to sound is going to sound pretty good. And so I think we have a similar sort of thing in the tension that's established in democracy, which means that any individual, any given person has no idea what's going on. And is likely to be quite wrong about the situation. But the product of the tension of all of the forces pulling against each other creates something that is actually very stable and potentially going in the right direction, if de Tocqueville is right. Maybe that's useful. I hope it is. But at the very least, and this is something that I always tell my students, so, it's the kind of misguided genius thing, right? Where people think, oh, well, I'm just misunderstood. Well, for those who actually were geniuses in history and recognized it, Nietzsche, Kant, Schopenhauer, and so on, they kind of turned out to be right. So it does happen, and if it does happen, and you have the next great idea, then you're likely to be ridiculed. You're likely not to be treated very well because people are not accustomed to thinking outside of the paradigm, and it's painful for them in a certain way. People don't like that kind of novelty. Something that is too new for people is actually unpleasant. And this is from Wilhelm Wundt's famous curve, so the Wundt curve, from a century ago in psychology. So we like a little bit of novelty. A little bit of novelty is exciting to us. But if there's too much novelty, then it kind of freaks us out and we don't really know what to do with it. And so those who are visionary geniuses, those who are the great innovators in science, in business, in art, in everything are going to be thinking outside of the current paradigm, far from normal, and not necessarily treated the best because of it. So there's hope, at least.